In your videos, you subscribe to methodological naturalism, correct?
For science, yes, obviously.
Yes. And now you're asking, what's your name?
Josh.
Josh, you're asking Josh for scientific evidence of God?
Yes.
Do you realize they contradict each other, these two things?
So there's no scientific evidence of God.
You don't realize.
I'm asking him, is there scientific?
Wait, hang on 1 second. What I'm saying is something different.
Which we were trying to establish.
Wait 1 second.
He said the
point I'm making is you're contradicting yourself by saying we subscribe to methodological naturalism.
He had evidence of God, scientific evidence. I'm saying he does not. We're now demonstrating that he does not have.
Hang on, Aaron. The only thing I'm trying to show you is what you say in your videos is contradicting what you're saying right now.
No, it isn't.
I'll tell you why. Your videos, you're very explicitly clear that methodological naturalism is the way science works. Correct. Now, methodological naturalism means natural effects, natural causation. That's it.
Yep.
Correct? Yep. Now, for somebody to say, I want scientific evidence of God, you're trying to make a submarine fly.
He's saying, so when he says that he has scientific evidence of God, he's making a submarine fly?
No,
he's saying he has evidence.
I'm making a different point. I'm making a different point.
2 seconds. Just to clarify a few things. All I was trying to say to you is that this is also a metaphysical discussion because you're talking about something in metaphysics.
Okay.
You can.
Which he doesn't like either.
No, so I'm saying I don't believe that anything that I said to you was not evidence that you would agree to be evidence. I would define evidence. That's why I said.
I have to be explicit. We are talking about scientific evidence.
Hold on a second. I would say evidence is just simply a proposition that renders a hypothesis as probable.
Right.
That is then taken on that proposition.
And I specified that in science it is necessarily a fact, objectively verifiable facts that indicate one conclusion over any other.
But then,
hang on, that's not true. That's not true.
Yes, that is.
So I'll tell you why that's not true. That's not true because of the problem of underdetermination and the problem of unconceived alternatives.
The fact that the evidence is defined the way that I say is not true because
you're saying there's one inference that you can make, right? But in philosophy of science, hang on, let me just make a general point. You study philosophy of science, so do I. So tell me this or not. Is there not such a thing as the underdetermination of unconceived alternatives, right? Carl Stanford and all the rest, right? What that basically says is the same evidence, you can make different inferences based upon that. Now, if you're going to disagree with the philosophy of science, well, you're actually...
Which I'm obviously not doing.
No, but you made it very clear that you don't agree with it, right?
No,
and if you don't agree with it, basically what you're saying is you're challenging the foundations of science.
Of evidence, and I'm asking for it.
No, that's not what you're doing. What you're actually doing is this, Aaron. The reason why you're disagreeing with me and you're disagreeing with him is because you misunderstand the philosophy of science. That's the reason why you disagree. And you don't like it, which you've made explicitly clear.
No, just but I haven't. And I don't disagree with the philosophy of science.
Okay, so tell me this. Tell me this.
He was not able to provide that.
So tell me this. Are you a scientific realist or an instrumentalist?
How are you defining evidence?
I'm not defining evidence. I'm asking a question. Are you a scientific realist?
Be evasive about that, so I want to press you on.
Wait, hang on. Are you a scientific realist or a scientific instrumentalist?
I don't know. Don't care.
Okay, wait, hang on a second. No, wait, hang on. I'll tell you why that matters, and it bears on the evidence.
I want to know.
I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that. The reason
I was very explicit and correct.
Wait a second.
He says I'm wrong, so he's going to have to give me the correction. What is the actual definition?
Sure.
How are you defining evidence?
Sure. It depends on whether you are a scientific realist or a scientific instrumentalist.
How do you define evidence?
So let me explain. If you're a scientific realist, then that would mean...
How do you define evidence?
Aaron, 1 second. If you're scientific...
This is a difficult question.
Aaron, relax. If you're a scientific realist, then that basically means that evidence for you is the evidence from science. Wherever you observe, wherever you see, whatever theories come up with, you believe that the unobservable world is the way that science is actually describing. However, if you're a scientific instrumentalist, then you believe in the observable claims, but you don't believe in the unobservable claims. This is also known as constructive empiricism. So when it comes to evidence, it matters whether you're a realist or a constructive empiricist. Now tell me, as a philosopher of science, you're doing PhD, right? Something like that. Tell me this, right?
No, in philosophy of science. Okay. So you know more than me.
Right. So look,
how do you define it?
If I'm a scientific instrumentalist, then evidence for me means something different for a scientific realist. Now Aron says, I don't know. I don't think you know the difference between the two, to be honest.
No, I don't.
No, if you don't, relax, he can speak for himself. Relax, he can speak for himself. So, if you're a scientific realist and you're a scientific instrumentalist, evidence is going to mean two different things for you. That's what I'm saying.
I don't understand this argument at all.
I know you don't.
I asked you how you define evidence. I did not get an answer.
I did give you the answer. The answer was, it depends whether you're an instrumentalist or a realist.
How do you?
How
do you define evidence?
Sure. Okay. So the way I define evidence is based upon my view, and the view that I hold. The view that I hold is that of constructive empiricism, and it has a subset view called selectionism. So I believe in the view of selectionism. Now, selectionism basically says this: we believe the claims about observables that scientists make, but claims about unobservables we do not accept. We are agnostic about them. Now, this view of selectionism, this was first proposed by Bas van Fassen, he's a philosopher of science, and this view was then developed by Brad Ray and others. And what this view basically says is this: if you look at science, there are some constraints in science which stop it from achieving truth, which fall short of it achieving truth. He can speak for himself. I'm speaking to him. I'm not speaking to him. I'm only, look, one second. I am not sharing my view. I'm sharing the view of philosophers of science. So let me explain that. You can challenge that. Look, I'm here to talk. Look, to be honest, I'm here to talk to Aron, not you.
Yeah, well, we can all talk whenever we
That's fine. That's fine. One second. Well, I'm answering your question. One second. I'm answering your question. Aron,
the entire time throughout that debate is to redefine.
I'm answering your question
incorrectly.
Aron,
so that's what you're doing now.
Aron, I'm answering your question. Let me complete your question. Your question is this:
Darwinism as something that it never was.
Wait, hang on. Don't try and change the topic. We can go to that. Okay. So when it comes to selectionism, the reason why selectionists believe that science doesn't achieve truth but only achieves instrumentally useful theories.
What is truth?
Well, truth is it depends how you define it, because there's different definitions. Yes,
so that's why.
You could have hang on. One second.
Exactly.
Look.
So he's saying my position that the truth is what the facts are.
You asked a question. Let me answer it.
Science can achieve facts.
No. So, Aron, listen for a second. I'm answering your question you asked me, and you keep interrupting me. I didn't interrupt you. So here's the thing. You asked about why I believe selectionism. Here's why I believe in selectionism. The problem of unconceived alternatives. Science works by having a web of theories which fit in, and those web of theories, they have unconceived alternatives, unconceived theories, unconceived observations, unconceived predictions. So because of this reason, what science gives us is not truth, but gives us
the truth is what the
correspondence theory.
Correspondence
theory is truth. One second.
So we can verify things that are true.
I'm just about to finish. Okay. So the view I subscribe to is a view in the philosophy of science known as selectionism, and that view basically says we are going to be agnostic about unobservables. Now, if you're attacking me, you need to attack the philosophers of science and write papers against them. You can't just say what the view that I hold is wrong.
We already established the truth is what the facts are. Science can achieve things that are true. Science can determine what is true.
I don't think you listened to anything I said.
What?
I don't think you listened to anything I said.
I wish I had.
Ask him a question.
But I had.
That's why.
Okay, so tell me this. Aron, you make popular YouTube videos, you've got millions of hits, and you don't know the basics about instrumentalism, realism, constructive empiricism, selectionism, constraints. You don't know none of this.
Philosophical. I'm not interested in philosophy.
So if you're not interested in philosophy, why are you talking about metaphysics? Why are you talking about the existence of God? Why are you dismissing all the philosophy of science?
I specified scientific evidence.
And by the way, listen, here's the thing. If you understood the philosophy of science, you wouldn't be making the statements you're making now. That's what I'm saying.
And all I'm saying is all I'm saying is that you are wrong. Still.
Wait, hang on. Why am I wrong?
The universe, right?
No, but metaphysics is
because you're trying. Okay, you said that science doesn't achieve truth.
So if you're saying something doesn't correspond to reality,
so challenge the philosophers of science and say it doesn't.
God does not.
Okay, but we established the truth is what the facts are. Right ahead. All we needed to do.
Correspondence theory of truth. Fine.
All we had to understand was what you mean by truth. So these guys say truth is what conforms to reality. Truth is what the facts are. Then your statement is wrong. Using that definition.
So are you saying selectionism is wrong?
You then have to bring in certain.
No, I don't know anything about selection.
Exactly.
So may be right. So I may be of the same position that you are, because the way you describe it sounds like what I subscribe to.
No. But you believe in scientific. It sounds like you believe in scientific realism.
Why? Because I would have thought that I believed in empiricism.
No. Okay, Aron, this is getting really silly now, right? Empiricism, scientific realism, two different categories. No. It's two different categories, right? They're both empiricism.
Okay.
For you to think scientific realism is something different to scientific empiricism is two different things.
Give your descriptions again.
Okay, scientific realism, scientific instrumentalism.
And what are they?
Okay, scientific realism is we believe in claims about observables that scientists make, and we believe in claims which are made about unobservable entities, structures, and processes.
Can you give me an example?
Okay, so for example, who would be a good...
Give me the other one.
Oh, wait, no, hang on a second.
Because I don't think that's...
No. Okay. So, when it comes to general relativity says time and space is flexible, and it also makes other sort of claims, and we have claims, for example, in quantum mechanics about the Copernican interpretation and this interpretation that many worlds want.
Okay.
So a scientific realist would say, when scientists are talking about the unobservables, entities, structures, and processes, they are talking about actual things, right? So that's realism. The second view is scientific...
If there are people who think that we talk about God is not real?
No. I'm talking about scientific realism and scientific instrumentalism. Okay, now tell me whether you agree with scientific instrumentalism. Scientific instrumentalism says this. We believe in claims that scientists make about observable entities. But
I don't like the term believe in either case, but go ahead.
I'm just giving you philosophical definitions.
Okay, yeah, I don't like those.
Okay, I know, you clearly don't. So, claims about unobservables, entities, processes, and structures, we are going to be agnostic about them. We're not going to say they are true, we're not going to say they are false, we're just going to remain agnostic about them. Now, I've given you two divergent views, and there's some views in the middle, right? Now, which ones do you subscribe to? Instrumentalism.
Yeah.
Now, if you believe in instrumentalism, what you're basically...
believe in.
Okay, do you subscribe to it?
Yeah. I think that more that seems to
you subscribe to it. Then that basically means when scientists are speaking about natural selection being a creative force for the generation of...
again.
Okay, fine. Forget even... Look, forget...
He said he had evidence of God.
Wait, hang on, I'm not...
I specified I was talking about scientific evidence and I asked him for
I'm not changing the topic, just give me a second. When scientists are talking about unobservable entities, processes, and structures, they are not saying something which is true. They are saying something which it might be true or might be false. They're agnostic about it. So if you're a scientific instrumentalist, that means Darwinian evolution, which you support.
And what do you think Darwinian evolution?
Wait, hang on.
Because this like it's funny.
Hang on.
I'm serious.
Hang on. Wait, hang on. That basically means you don't believe it to be true if you're an instrumentalist. So that basically means this whole time, Aron, you know what you just did? I made a little hole, you walked into it.
No, I didn't.
You just admitted you're a scientific instrumentalist.
If you want to call that
You did say that. You did say that. That means you believe science doesn't give you truth but gives you instrumentally useful theories.
Oh no, but it can show what is true.
You don't deny that. But that means that your claims about science gives you truth is false.
As I said to him earlier, you can't prove a hypothesis to be true, you can't prove the hypothesis to be true, but you can prove it false.
That's not true. One second, Aaron, let me explain. You're referring to Popper's falsificationism, which scientists have moved away from. They've actually moved away from that. You're like 40 years out of date.
Except that they're still teaching.
Because philosophers of science have moved on to scientific holism now.
Scientific holism?
Holism, yeah.
Is this every scientist? Is this a
No, these are, wait, listen, you're not important, he is. Let me speak to him.
Is that
the guy who owns the cameras?
He's trying to help you, you're not going to get help today. You ain't going to get help today. Assalamu alaikum. Okay.
What's the issue, man? What's the problem?
So he said he had evidence of God. We are talking.
Are you not gonna acknowledge the fact that you just fell in a hole?
No. You can't say that I fell into a hole.
Because you just agree to scientific instrumentalism.
Okay.
Right? Okay. And that basically means you don't believe science gives you truth but instrumentally useful theories.
Okay, even if that's the case.
That is the case.
Even if that's the case, it has no relevance.
So we're going to swiftly move on.
It has no relevance to our discussion.
It does.
How?
It does. Because what you believe in is science can give you truth. And I just took you all the way around to showing you that you just contradicted yourself.
Okay, so call it a contradiction then. How is it relevant to our discussion?
Well, how it's relevant is from a contradiction, anything follows. So since you contradict yourself and you're happy with having a worldview which has contradiction, you can make any claim.
Okay. I don't know.
By the way, that's a principle in philosophy. From a contradiction, anything follows.
Again, We were talking about truth being what the facts are, what we can show to be true, right?
Yeah, and the conversation moved on to science and the philosophy of science, which you dismissed.
Right.
And I showed that you accepted scientific instrumentalism, which, by the way, you need to delete all of your YouTube videos about Darwinian evolution being true.
Should probably
Have fun with the word salad.
Okay,
But that's still not relevant to what we were talking about.
Of course it is. Because
Of course it
look,
isn't.
the reason why I came in is, look, I don't even know this guy, right? But what I do know about him
You
is
don't know
this.
me either, by the way, mate.
I don't really know.
You're making assumptions about what I think.
Look,
Because we're not playing philosophical word salad.
Well, I had a good discussion with
Well, hang
you
on,
anyway.
Josh.
Thank you. I thought we did.
Josh, your point, I came in.
doesn't it?
Aaron, what's going on?
What's going on? I'm not playing philosophical word salad.
Can we finish our conversation?
We're running.
You're running, yeah. He got you in America, now he's being.
It seems I'm not allowed to. I'm not important enough.
I
to have a
handed him his
discussion with
ass,
POE.
and he redefined everything.
He destroyed you in
Why are you
America.
walking on now?
I want to talk
Why?
because I saw that
Hang on.
you uploaded that video of our debate as if you'd done well.
He did.
I was stunned. You sucked ass. You redefined everything wrong. Tell him, what is Darwinism? Is Darwinian evolution a fact? That was our
I'm not
debate.
important enough to talk.
So, okay,
Let's hear his definition of a fact, and let's hear his definition of Darwinian evolution, because his definition are his own definitions. They are not the definitions of science.
All right.
So he redefined everything wrong.
Come on, Mr.
And I proved that.
I don't think you did.
Can I respond?
I did.
Can I respond?
Yeah, respond. What
Okay,
is
respond.
Darwinian evolution?
Okay, so your question is, what is Darwinian evolution and what is a fact?
Yep.
Okay, now, I didn't interrupt you when you made
Hold on.
the...
What is a fact?
I would say a proposition that corresponds to reality.
I don't like proposition. I would like.
Aaron, can I respond to you? Look, he's not going to help you. He's not going to help you. He's definitely not going to help you. All right? Let me just speak to you. So you're saying the fact. What is a fact?
What is a fact?
Now,
Now, are we talking in science?
Aaron, I'm not going to interrupt you.
Are we talking in science?
Can you let me speak?
Seems there's a lot of ego at play.
Are we talking about science?
Seems like we're not
Let me complete my sentence
discussion,
first.
isn't it?
She's not going to answer. Okay.
Okay. When we're speaking about fact, the first thing which I want to speak about is what philosophers define fact as, and then we're going to get to science. Okay? So, one of the first problems in the philosophy of science, in fact there's a paper which is called "Is the First Problem in Philosophy What is a Fact?" That they basically claim it is, and there's a whole bunch of different definitions. However, there is a generally agreed upon definition in science. Now, my first video, which you responded to, which I made on Darwin Day, around that period, right, in 2016, I basically said right at the beginning, Darwinian evolution, if it's defined as a fact from a philosophy point of view, that fact is something which you can define as absolute, doesn't change, and cannot be changed because of future observations, then it's not a fact. However, in the same video, I said if you say a fact is a generally prevailing theory in science, is a theory which is described by the majority, or it is a valid. Wait, hang on, 1 second. 1 second, Aaron. 1 second, Aaron. Okay, I'll explain why.
The second one is wrong.
Wait, hang on.
I don't know about second, I'm saying philosophical.
No. Why I said it was this. Look, too many things going on, but let me just explain. In philosophy, there is a massive discussion about what is a fact. So therefore, whenever you speak about a fact, you need to define what you're speaking about. So in that paper, which is published by Cambridge University, it speaks about what is a fact. And what it goes on to say is this: whenever you speak about a fact in a particular context, you need to define it clearly, then speak about it in a different context. A fact may mean something else. So in the beginning of my video, I said this is the way I am defining a fact for the purposes of this discussion. And I said, and that's the definition I used, which I'm allowed to do.
Which one?
Which I said was something absolute, something that's not going to change, and something that can't be revised, right?
That's not a fact.
No. Hang on. I don't know.
No, but
In philosophy.
Wait.
metaphysics, that's not a definition
Yes,
of fact.
and that's why I
The
said.
definition of fact is either what I said, a proposition that corresponds to reality,
No.
an obtaining state of affairs. That is not
Okay,
how
look.
they define
I
fact.
don't think you're clear on what I'm trying to say.
Wait till you hear how he defines Darwin.
Wait, hang
No,
on.
but I'm just saying, I agree with you in a lot you're saying, but
Josh, what I'm saying is this. In that paper it says, fact can be defined in many different ways. So therefore, in a context when you're speaking, you need to specify what you're speaking about. Do you understand? So for the purposes of that discussion, I used it in that way. I could use the word truth, I could use a different term. For the purposes of that discussion, it doesn't mean that in philosophy there's only one definition, because according to the paper which I just referenced, there is no one definition. And that's what you're saying, okay?
So,
now, the definition of Darwinian evolution, what is the definition? Now, Darwinian evolution can be defined by many, whether you look at pre-modern synthesis or post-modern synthesis, or later on the extended
still
synthesis.
repeating the same error.
Wait, hang on one second. Aaron, let me complete. So whenever you speak about Darwinian evolution, you need to define what you mean.
Evolution. Why are you specifying Darwinian evolution? What's the difference?
Philosopher Jerry Fodor, who's a philosopher of science, philosopher of biology, he defines it in this particular way. He says Darwinian evolution has two twin theses. It has a phylogenetic history, the tree of life, and natural selection being the primary mechanism to drive that evolutionary change.
That's wrong too.
So Jerry Fodor is wrong?
Yeah.
So philosopher of science is wrong?
No, the primary mechanism is genetic drift. That is primary.
The primary...
Yeah, that's the primary.
I'm shocked you're saying this.
No,
And you're on YouTube. Are you drunk or something?
so all you're going to
You're telling me did Darwin write about genetic drift?
Darwin didn't know about genetic
Exactly.
drift.
So Darwin's main idea
So
was
Darwinian
natural
evolution-
selection.
So Darwinian evolution refers only to what Darwin himself proposed.
No.
Right? The Darwinian
No.
mechanisms, natural and sexual
Wait,
selection.
hang on, Aaron.
So that-
You're really embarrassing yourself here.
No, I'm not.
You're saying the primary driver of evolution is genetic drift.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what I want you to do? I want you to go down the road to the Royal Society. You've just discovered something amazing, because according to them, they believe Darwin was right. Natural selection is the primary driving force. Of course, some of them disagree, but
Darwin was right, and in his time he didn't know about genetic drift.
Aaron, you're saying genetic drift is the primary factor?
Yes. Yes.
You need to write a paper, and you need to challenge all the Darwinists, because you just made two. No one's talking to you, yeah? You just made two grave errors. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
The conversation as
You
well,
could try it.
I feel
You could
like
try it. You could try it.
Because
Actually,
you're being rude to everybody around here, and that's not the nature of the... So,
I'm not talking to you. Because you're interrupting me. I'm talking to him.
what he did...
I wasn't talking to you.
What he did in our debate is to redefine.
Touch the combo if you want, mate.
You can help him, but he's looking desperate right now. He's looking desperate right now.
I really want to have good discussions, man.
I know. And I know you're...
You're wearing sunglasses on a sunny day, on a cloudy day.
It's not my boss for everything he's saying either.
So what he did was to redefine Darwinian evolution
According to what philosophers say.
into macroevolution.
No?
And what was the word you used for microevolution? Because you didn't use macroevolution.
I don't even know if you're sober right now, to be
I
honest.
think he just used evolution for that, and then Darwinian evolution became the macroevolution argument. So Darwinian evolution was known to be the things that Darwin himself postulated, which was
Right.
natural and sexual selection.
Wait, hang on. You just contradicted yourself.
And no, I
You
didn't- I
you
did
just said
not.
natural and sexual selection, and before you said the primary force is genetic drift.
That's correct. Both statements are indeed
Again,
correct.
do you know how you're being consistent? By being inconsistent. First you were
I'm being
inconsistent
inconsistent.
about instrumentalism and realism, and now you're inconsistent about natural selection being the primary force and a genetic drift.
Because I'm a bit confused. Because when you said
Darwin didn't know about genetic drift. He knew that natural selection acted on differences. He didn't know the source of the differences. It turns out the source of the differences is genetic drift, and that is actually the primary, because you can have quite a lot of evolution without any natural selection or sexual selection even being involved. That's what makes it primary.
It's not, wait, hang on, Aaron. Tell me this, right? If what you're saying is right, why is it that the scientific and the philosophy of biology literature doesn't reflect that?
You're going to assert that it doesn't, and you have.
I'll tell you, I'll give you evidence that it doesn't. I'll give you evidence that it doesn't. Michael Roos is a philosopher of science, he's an atheist, so yeah, there's no
We have
trouble.
to have another citation. Some famous philosopher, some famous somebody says something.
So what do you want? You want me to call Muhammad Hijab, or you want me to call that guy with a
I'm not
hat?
having to cite anybody else.
But you should cite someone if that's the natural science,
Well,
right?
then let's do this online where I can look up everybody's name.
Okay, so why do you give us,
Otherwise, I'm giving you evidence directly. I'm explaining how it works.
Aaron, why do you give us evidence that genetic drift, give us a citation, genetic drift is the primary force?
Why do I have to give a citation? We're talking directly. I'm
Making a
explaining
claim.
it.
You're making-
I'm explaining it to him.
So give me evidence for that.
I just did.
What's the evidence? You said so?
Your word.
Do you accept that humans have an average of 128 mutations per zygote?
Yeah, they could do.
What?
They could do.
They could do. Okay, so you accept it. So I mean, this type of variance occurs in all organisms, right? And this is the source of genetic drift, right? You understand that if you put a population...
It's not the source of genetic drift. Genetic drift is a force. You're conflating
and the
terms.
source of that variance is...
Okay, no, Aaron, what you're doing is you're making, again, another conflation, right? Let me explain what you're doing. Natural selection is the force. Once again, Aaron, random mutations is the fodder, which is the Play-Doh which natural selection shapes. Genetic drift is not a primary force. It is a secondary or tertiary force within the paradigm of Darwinian evolution. So you have genetic drift. You have
organism.
hang on. You have genetic drift. You have natural selection being the primary thing.
Nope.
You also have niche construction. You also have
we don't have natural selection as a primary thing. For the
natural
reason that I
selection
always
is the
explained.
primary thing.
That's what Darwin thought, and he was right that natural selection is a thing. But later it was determined.
Okay, have you heard of Francis Crick?
Yes, of course.
Okay, do you think Francis Crick knew what he was talking about, or you know what you're talking about?
I did just explain how this works.
Okay,
You should
Francis
understand.
Crick, here's what he said.
He's got
Okay,
to
what
quote
was it?
somebody again.
Okay, but you don't give any scientific evidence.
I do.
And you know what? Francis Crick.
explain the science
Wait,
to you.
hang on.
It doesn't do any
but
good to cite papers.
You don't like the
Rather
philosophy of
than-
science. You don't like the philosophy of science, so how can you explain the science? Francis Crick, here's what he said about the blind watchmaker. Richard Dawkins wrote The Blind Watchmaker to explain the power of natural selection, not genetic drift. Natural selection being the primary force.
But you understand-
And once again, Francis Crick said, if you doubt the power of natural selection to be the driving force in evolution, then read The Blind Watchmaker. Right? So you're challenging, you know Dawkins. Why don't you write to him and say he's wrong?
Do you understand that every organism has this variance, right? Genetic variance, these mutations. That these are the sources.
No one disagrees with that. I don't think the tree disagrees with that.
Okay, I don't care about the tree. So you understand that any population of organisms, you're going to have this kind of diversity, right? And without natural selection even being involved, or sexual selection either, neither of the Darwinian mechanisms, neither one of them are necessary. You're still going to have evolution. Natural
You're
selection.
making a different claim now. The earlier claim you made was it's not the
drift
primary
still
force.
right, because genetic drift still applies whether there's natural selection or sexual selection. So you don't need either of the Darwinian mechanisms to achieve evolution. That's true.
Aaron, you know
It
what?
doesn't matter what somebody
Aaron,
said somewhere.
but Aaron,
That's true, and
okay.
we can all understand that, right?
Okay, Aaron, here's the thing, yeah? If you're going to make claims like this, at least give...
Are you going to disagree with
I totally disagree with that. And I give you evidences for that.
That if you put a population of
No.
organisms,
I totally disagree that it's the primary force.
but if that force, is it a force now, or we agree to use the word force? If we're going to allow that genetic drift,
What do you call it?
it doesn't really matter.
The effect.
So I'm not going to
Remember,
correct
the
you, I'm
effect of
saying
genetic drift.
not like he's doing me. So if you allow a herd of sheep out here, right, and you're going to have variation within those sheep. Eventually, we could even have a form of speciation without any natural selection or sexual selection necessary. So that makes genetic drift the basis, because that operates when the others even don't exist.
Okay, so now you're saying something different. Before you said it's not the primary force. Now you're saying, assuming natural selection is not there, evolution will still take place. These are two different claims.
Are you not? How do you not understand anything I just said?
No, I did understand clearly exactly what you said.
Obviously not.
So you,
didn't
wait, hang on a
understand
second,
anything I
Aaron.
said.
You need to listen to me, because I'm not sure if you really understand what's going on.
Right, he's just going to insult me soon.
Guys, maybe
Well,
it's been a staple of this conversation since you're presenting this today.
Aaron, if you're going to make claims, I'm going to challenge them. You can't accept me. You can't expect me not to challenge them.
You're going to deny that evolution is going to happen with just genetic drift. You deny that.
No, I totally agree with that.
Well, then, what are you saying that you disagree with me about?
What I'm saying
That
is,
was the one claim I was making.
no, the claim you're making was it's the primary
Right,
force.
it exists,
So, genetic
and
drift
it operates even without the other.
Hang on.
The other
And
need, understand this, without genetic drift, you don't have anything for natural selection to act upon. That makes genetic drift primary.
No, you're actually speaking about random mutations, not genetic drift right now.
Where do you think the genetic drift comes from? Is from the random mutations.
Random
That's why I asked
mutations,
earlier.
yes, but you're making a category mistake again. Aaron, You really need.
Making a category mistake.
Aaron, no one's going to help you out here, right? Aaron,
This is not going to get any better.